Oh, this is 90.7 WVKC, the voice of Knox. This is the big picture. And I am joined this time by my RA.
Hello.
Kai Epstein.
Kai Epstein.
Let me know if the audio is still good or not once my people are on.
Your people.
My people. The people who actually listen to it live, which are like 2, 3, 4. And then everyone else listens to it afterward, I hope.
Oh, that's good.
Right, that's nice. So, we don't have a theater person this time. It's a lovely thing.
Nope, just me.
Just Kai. So, we're going to talk about lots of things, his major, etc. And I guess that's where we'll start. So, Kai, your major is psychology.
It is.
That is indeed what he does. And I'm, little known fact, I'm thinking about maybe switching to psychology.
Really? That would be awesome.
It's in my realm of places to maybe major in.
Yeah, well, I actually switched twice before I...
What were the majors before psychology?
Well, see, the first one that I did was when I was a freshman, I declared to major in computer science. But I don't know. I took a few classes and they were interesting and everything, but I don't know. I kind of had this vision of me working as a full-time computer scientist somewhere, writing code for my job and, being indoors all the time. And that didn't really seem like something I wanted to do. So I promptly, also a lot of my friends at the time were like in the physics department. So that might have had something to do with it. So I tried switching to physics and that did not last for very long.
Yeah, physics is really hard.
It was a lot harder than I thought it was going to be, mostly because I don't think my math background was as good as it could have been. So basically that lasted all of 2 classes before I realized it was taking a chainsaw to my GPA. And I already had a bunch of psych electives. So I'm like, hey, this is really interesting. I think I'll switch to psychology, which worked out pretty well, I think.
So that does kind of lead into the obvious thing. So you said the reason you went into, so your base reason for going into psych is that you had taken classes and that you had been interested in it.
Oh, yes.
Is there anything else that sort of led you in that direction besides that, or?
Not really, actually. I took one psychology class in high school and I thought it was pretty interesting, but I hadn't really thought about it,
Yeah.
I hadn't come to Knox and been like, oh, I'm going to become a psychology major.
Which is interesting because that is a thing that can happen because a lot of the people I've talked to on this show, their major was what they were going to do for a long time.
Yeah. See, I just didn't know what was going to happen. I initially went into computer science because, it sounded cool. And also they have stereotypically large paychecks at the end of the day. But I don't know.
And that's sort of where I'm in a similar thing where I don't know what I want to do.
Money or interest? Which
which do you go with? Preferably somewhere in the middle.
That's true.
Would be good.
I wouldn't.
So Teresa was on last week and we talked about how money shouldn't be the primary goal.
No, it shouldn't. Just a factor.
Just a factor to consider. Okay, so you've decided to major into psychology. What aspect of psychology are you most interested in? What were the parts of psychology that made you interested enough to major?
Okay, so I feel like I could be wrong, but I feel like there's this general stereotype that I've kind of encountered whenever I say that I'm a psych major to friends and family back home. And they're like, oh, you're going to psychoanalyze me? Are you reading me? What am I thinking right now? And that's really not what psychology is about. I tend to think of it more as you end up with these trends. You gather data and you end up with these trends of human behavior that you can't really predict an individual's behavior or an individual's train of thought or anything. But what you can do is measure an average trend of how humans in general behave and think, which honestly, some of these things are absolutely fascinating. They're I took this really, really cool class called consumer behavior, which blew my mind in a lot of ways because in this class, we went through all of the ways that some of these advertising psychologists will design advertisements to get you to buy stuff you don't need, continue buying the same stuff that you don't need for more than you should be paying for it, and not realize that you're overpaying for stuff that you don't actually need. And, everyone's like, oh, I've never done that. But after I took after I took this class, there were several things that I realized, even though I consider myself a very, very conscientious spender. I tend to be very careful with money, but there were several things that I've definitely fallen for in the past, and I think most people do. So they take advantage of these average trends, and if they do enough of them, like everybody's going to fall for some of them, and it's both scary but also fascinating at the same time.
I was going to say like that, and I've heard that before, but I'm not always like that seems scary to me. That there are ways you can get in someone's subconscious without them even knowing.
Yeah, and see, it's not about individual behavior manipulation though. Like that's something I have to like bring forth, like really accentuate here, because it's not like, oh, I'm controlling you mentally. Like no, what they're doing is they're influencing the average curve of behavior. So an example of this, and there's plenty of these, is I remember I was reading about this. One of these private advertisers. So whenever a company is doing bad, like very poorly with a product, they'll sometimes hire this guy and his team to come up with some sort of advertising campaign that would completely change around how they're selling stuff.
Yeah.
And this particular company was selling, I believe, this like bread baker, I think, like some sort of, almost like it looked like a crock pot, but you just put like bread dough in it and then it like turns it into a loaf of bread.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't really find it very interesting either, so that's probably why no one bought it. But no one was buying this thing. So what he suggested is they make a deluxe version, right? So their company started production of this deluxe version of whatever the product that they were trying to sell.
Yeah.
And they put it next to the original on the shelves at Walmart or whatever. And this deluxe version was like twice and a half the price, had all these like these little doodads that you could use it for or whatever. And it was never intended to be sold at all. Like no one was supposed to buy that one. But what then ended up happening was they increased sales rates by like 30% of the original one. It just flew off the shelves just by having a comparison, which is really strange.
That is very interesting. And it's sort of comforting, the thing you said of like, it's like the example you gave. It's not individual control. It's not like in that moment or you're in the store, they've got control of your mind. It's just like they're just changed. Like if the regular curve is here, it's just a little bit higher now.
You increase it by a percentage, right? Yeah. So in increasing production rates, there's other effects called like decoys where they'll actually that's exactly what it is. That's a decoy. Yeah. So they'll put a crazy deal, right? That you're never supposed to take, that makes the original deal look really good. You're like, I could get this deluxe version for like $300, or I could get like this $50 thing that's almost as good. Let's do it, and they'll do that with packages too. With like magazine packages is a big thing. Like they'll be like, we'll sell you just the magazines for $10 a month, right?
Yeah.
Or we'll sell you the magazines and the internet for $12 a month or something, right? And wait, am I doing that right? I think that's what they were doing.
Something like
that. They basically have this decoy that sounds like a really bad deal, and then an average deal, which sounds like a really good deal.
Isn't that?
And you end up. It doesn't even like it doesn't change the rate of. It not only changes the rate of people who actually buy it, but it like changes it by a huge margin, which is insane. Like 30% usually with decoys, which is just mind-blowing.
Isn't that? There's also a similar thing, not just in marketing, but in like a general debate and conversation where you see it in negotiation where you first say like, oh, we want this much money.
Oh yeah.
When you really aren't expecting to get that much, but you're just setting the bar really high.
There's all those kinds of things for like deal making. They call that like foot in the door techniques.
Yeah, the foot in the door technique.
So you like ask for just a little bit first, right? Mm-hmm. And then people are more likely to say yes to whatever you ask for next. So if you'd be like, oh, hey, could I, or actually, no, this is a perfect example. If you need someone to jump your car at Walmart, you could be like, oh, can I have the time? And they'll be like, oh yeah, it's 3:30. Oh, by the way, can you also give me a jump? Like, they're more likely to say yes.
We can do that. Yeah, we can do that. I forgot, actually, you asked me to do that. We'll do that.
I already did it, actually.
Oh. I don't have to
I called campus safety. Apparently they jump cars now, which is, I did not know.
Hey,
but the problem is
reason to go to Knox.
Quick digression here, but I went to Walmart after that, and I turned the car off, and it wouldn't start again. So that's why I used the example, because I had to like chase down random people at Walmart and ask for a jump, and surprisingly, no one had any jumper cables. So I was that's actually why I called you earlier.
Oh, really?
I was like, I'm stranded.
I thought you were calling about the show, and I'm like, I was in class, so I just like did the old like you hit the messenger and then you click one of the options. Like, sorry, I can't talk right now.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
Anyway,
you shouldn't be on your phone in class, but also calls are one of those things where even if I'm in class, which I guess maybe we shouldn't do, I'll like take a glance and like, who is it? Like if it's my mom, maybe I'm like, okay, maybe I should go out in case it's something really serious or what have
but if
you.
it's your RA, it's like, can't talk.
Well,
no,
I guess I assumed it had to do with the show. I didn't realize you were stranded at Walmart.
It's okay.
I've learned my
I wouldn't
lesson.
have made you get out of class anyway.
Okay, that's fair. So it all worked out in the end.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, the interest in psychology and how like you took classes and got interested in certain things, that brings us to the thing which we'll probably talk a lot about.
Oh, yeah.
Which is something I'm very interested in. Also, he is my RA, so this is why I know this. Because I don't just stalk him. But your research.
Oh yeah, my senior research project in this case.
Yeah,
which is coming along actually.
Yeah, we'll talk all about some of it, but like so the basic idea from what I understand is like you're looking at comedy, humor.
Yeah.
Correct? And you'll correct me if I'm wrong. Isn't it like you're looking for like sort of an objective line of comedy?
Honestly, my project has kind of transformed a lot in the last few weeks / months. But yes, you're right on one thing. It is definitely focusing on humor. And so I would say more my literature review is kind of looking around and bringing forth bits of all these theories of how humor works or what even humor is.
Yeah.
And that's a very interesting question. That's what got me interested in the first place, because humor is one of these things where like you could tell some really funny joke, right? And someone maybe rolling on the ground laughing at it. It's everyone's been there where they just hear something that's absolutely hilarious and they can't even breathe. But if anyone were to ask you like, why do you find that funny? You might be able to kind of explain it, but it's really difficult to find words explaining why exactly you found something so funny.
Yeah.
So, but that's an odd thing because humor isn't rare. Like that's not something that only happens every once in a while. Generally speaking, I mean, maybe rolling on the ground, laughing, wheezing, not even be able to breathe, that happens every once in a while. But generally, you find things funny every day. You know, this is a very, very common phenomenon within human behavior. Within the human cognitive process. And I, throughout my literature review, when I was looking through all these things, and I actually had to go through not just like psychology papers, but this is a very fundamental problem that's been talked about, you know, through even like early philosophy too, of like what makes something funny.
Yeah.
And what I found is it's very humor from a sociological standpoint, it regards not just to humor cognition, but like to human behavior is extremely important. Like this is something that is in most interactions, I would say. Like, yeah, there's very few human interactions you're going to have that are like utterly humorless, and people in general that could be described as utterly humorless they're not very fun to be around. You know, it's not desirable to have no sense of humor. Like a sense of humor is like on everyone's top list when describing traits they want in a friend, in parents, in like a significant other. Yeah, like this is something that's very socially desirable. So what is this? Why is something funny? And the answer to that obviously is a lot more complicated than I ever thought it would be. So I ended up having to write this very extensive literature review on on all these different theories for it. And I mean, I could explain a few of them if you want, but
well, I kind of want to get more at what you think, I suppose. Like, so what I understand is you were like, okay, so looking at what makes something funny, and then you put out this sort of poll almost.
Okay, so what I'm testing in the poll, my actual research, All right, I'm going to have to explain a little bit more about some aspect of humor before I can talk about my research, because it's like...
Go for it. I am intrigued. I don't know if the people who are watching are either bored out of their mind or not, but I am interested.
Okay, so let's put it this way. For my actual research, I was testing more of a sociological that from a more like social standpoint, social psychology and social interactions of how that's working. So what I was testing was how certain personality types relate to certain styles of humor, certain kinds of humor. And the kinds of humor that I used were broken up by this one guy. And what he essentially did was he diagrammed all of these different types of humor in basically 4 different categories. And the way that he did these categories was he used 2 separate dimensions on like an XY axis. So he had humor that was interpersonal, humor that was intrapersonal. So either within yourself, like the target of whatever is funny is either outside of yourself, right? The person that's telling the joke or making the thing that's funny, right? Or inside of yourself, okay? So then the other dimension is either it's malign, so it's bad, it's negative, or it's benign, so almost like positive or not really. Good intentions. Good intentions. Yeah. So let's say positive, negative, inside, outside, right? And so when you combine those, you get 4 separate main styles, and these are the styles that I was using for my research. So you either have, if you combine, let's see, outside of yourself and negative, you end up with a style called aggressive humor. And this is fairly common. This is like whenever there's a target of the person that is the target of the humor is another person or a group of people or something outside of yourself.
It's often like political humor.
It could be political. It's not just political humor, though. It's used in political humor, obviously.
But it's also like negative things.
Yeah, think of it like, I mean,
racist jokes.
Aggressive humor isn't always bad, but it can be bad.
Yeah.
You know, like
I'd say political humor is good because you're making fun of people who are in high places and
So I mean, there's this whole debate of like, when is it okay to? But this is the whole idea of like punching up or punching down.
Yeah.
Aggressive is the act of punching. So obviously, not all humor requires punching.
Yeah.
But in this case, it's negative and it's targeted outside of the person that's making the joke, and so that's one of the styles, right? So another one of the styles is called self-deprecating. And so that's also negative, but that's the opposite. It's really like inside yourself. And that's actually, it's something that I found when I was going through some of these was in a social aspect, these are used for very, very different things. So aggressive humor is used to make the person that's making the joke seem more like superior in some way to the person that's the target. So this could be morally superior, intellectually superior, physically superior, just some sort of superiority to whatever is happening, right?
Whatever the source of the,
whatever is being targeted. For self-deprecating, the idea is to do basically the opposite. So what happens? I have plenty of these examples in my survey here, but the idea is to make yourself seem more insignificant, but in a funny way, you know?
Yeah.
And this is what's interesting about this style is it's often used to combat aggressive humor in the first place. So think of it like, say, let's go to like the bully playground idea. So you have the bully making fun of someone who is, so you could have the bully making fun of someone who's scrawny, right?
Yeah.
And normally, if he like says, "Oh, you're so small" or whatever, you couldn't do this.
Yeah.
And people laugh because he's making himself seem bigger than the other person, right?
Yeah.
But what if the guy who is smaller makes fun of himself first? Oh, like makes all these jokes about himself being scrawny, right? Now, when the bully says, "Oh, haha, you're so small," everyone's like, "Okay, yeah, you've
repeated his
no
joke.
Shit." Like,
yeah.
Anyway, but yeah, so self-deprecating is usually used to combat on like at least a social landscape aggressive humor, which is really, really interesting to me. But then there's two other styles. So let me talk about the two positives.
Yeah.
So you also have this one style called affiliative humor. And what affiliative is it's outside of yourself and then positive. So these are going to be jokes. These are going to be like jokes that we think of normally. You know, they're going to be jokes that don't really have a target, they have a target, but the target isn't being put down in any way.
Yeah.
The person who's telling the jokes isn't being boosted up. Usually they're not related in any way. You know, I have no connection to the joke I'm making affiliative. So think of puns, you know, like when someone makes a pun, it's outside of yourself and it's, you know, positive. It's benign, you know. And that style is generally used for like building social cohesion in a way. So you'll notice like when someone, you know, dad jokes are a good one. So something to lighten the mood in certain situations, if you will, or just generally give the group as a whole to something to laugh about. And when everyone's laughing, they're on the same like brave wave function in a way. You're all thinking about the same thing. You're all on the same page. And that's actually a really good feeling socially, you know, to all like have the same idea and the same idea about something. Which I'll get back to later is kind of one of the whole reasons that I think humor evolved in the first place in social interactions. But so that's affiliative. And then the last one's a little confusing. It's confused me, but it's definitely, it's a style, is self-enhancement. And self-enhancement is kind of a combination of like affiliative and self-deprecating in a way. So you focus on something negative, or well, something, it could be something negative about yourself, it could be something positive about yourself, and then you make a joke about that. So it could be something negative but not that negative, you know. It's like what would self-enhancing be? Okay, so say you're caught in the rain, right? Mm-hmm. And your day is like not that great because you just got caught in the rain. So you make a joke about like, oh, at least it's not raining, and then like it starts raining and then you start laughing. Like that could be self-enhancing. That's not really, you're not deprecating yourself. You're not making yourself small. It's not you're not targeting some aspect about yourself and diminishing it.
So it's like you're taking something that's negative but making it a sort of positive, laughing at the face of, in the case of the rain.
Actually, self-deprecating is interesting because that it plays into a almost like a self-defense mechanism similar to self-deprecating. Yeah. But self-enhancing is more of a defense against the environment than a defense against
yourself.
A defense against other people. Oh, yeah. You know? So you end up with, and that's actually one of these theories of how humor even got started in the first place. I actually think the original styles of humor might have even been self-enhancing in a way, because what it does is you end up, okay, so
it'd be like,
think of it this way. Yeah. There's a lot of things that go wrong in the world in your life. There's probably more things, at least small things, that go wrong in someone's life than actually go right. Right. So, and from a hunter-gatherer perspective, right, if you have all of these things that are happening that are going wrong, you know, and all these little frustrations you have to have some sort of like, especially if you're a conscious being, you have to have some sort of mechanism to cope with that, right?
To de-stress.
And that's kind of what humor is. It's this is really bad, but it's not actually that bad, you know, like, oh, this goes against how I think the world should be right now, but it's not actually that bad. It's so like when you end up with all these contradictions, you know? Yeah.
When something bad happens and someone makes a sly joke, like, oh, my luck, of course this would happen. Like making light of.
Well, yeah, actually exactly like that. But it's not even so much, and I'm going to correct myself earlier, it's not even so much bad things happening to you. When I say bad things happening to you, I mean things that conflict with the way that you think the world should be. Or should be going. And that's actually a very important distinction. That's actually a very important distinction because that is in essence what humor is. It's when things don't line up with the way that you think the world makes sense logically. And that's I go into this a little bit in my literature review, but that's actually kind of why some things can be really funny to some people and not funny at all and even offensive to other people, right? Mm-hmm. Because some people, something happens that goes against how they think the world should logically work, but it's not that bad for them, right? They're like, oh, this is wrong, but haha, that's funny. Yeah. Other people, that's a lot closer to home, right? So you end up with exactly the opposite. It's no longer benign. It's no longer a threat. It's more of a threat than an inconvenience.
Because I was gonna bring up, I mean, it's a touchy subject, so you probably won't stay on it too much, but like, I feel like certain things, especially with the internal external side of things, can change greatly person to person. Because if you attack, say, a religious belief or a race or like that, could be internal or external depending on the person seeing the joke, which would very much change.
That's a big thing. That's why you'll end up with people that, and then some people will, if you attack a certain group that you don't identify with, right, or that's really far away from your identity, per se, then you could potentially find that funny, right? Because it's wrong in your opinion. You're like, oh, that's so wrong, but it's so far away from your identity, that you end up that it's benign for you. It's like, oh, and so what laughter tends to be is like a release of that tension. So there's still tension in that case. Yeah. And that's actually why a lot of like comedians use sexual jokes, because you end up with, we have this huge like sexual taboo, right? Mm-hmm. In a lot of cultures, not just ours, but like in our cultures, sex is pretty taboo, right? Yeah. So when comedians joke about it, people get kind of nervous and uncomfortable. And then when people laugh, that's like them releasing this uncomfortableness, like, okay, that's pretty like messed up, but it's not actually that bad, Yeah. And this effect gets actually magnified, I noticed, with when you add any degree of truth to what you're talking about. So like, let's do with like the sexual example, right? So if someone states, sex is already taboo, right? And then someone makes a joke about sex, but then they add like a truth to it that everybody kind of knows but never really talks about, then that amplifies the tension that you're feeling. Yeah, because and then like, and therefore the laughter, So so that's how that goes. But what I was testing, I'm going to go back to what my actual research is. What I was testing was basically personality with preferences of these categories. Yeah. So I used for my research the Big Five personality test, which is, have you ever heard of Big Five? Big Five, isn't it? Big Five personality scale.
I'm more familiar with the Myers-Briggs ones, but I've definitely heard the Big Five. I've just forgotten what each.
It's one of these personality models.
Isn't it like confidence or like
you have different? Yeah, so you have conscientiousness, which is like attention to detail per se, kind of. You have neuroticism, which is like higher neuroticism means more susceptibility to like negative emotions in a way. So, negative emotions in terms of like anxiety and depression or like just general fear about things. Yeah. So that's higher neuroticism. Then you have extroversion versus introversion. So that's like your willingness to or your desire to be with others in a way. I mean, it's a little more complicated than that, but I'm just going to say for our purposes. What do I have? I should know these. There's others. But the particular one that I was looking for mine was I was looking at a score of neuroticism. So neuroticism has a lot of different predictors because it's a huge influence in the way we're thinking of things. Like if someone who's scoring very, very high neuroticism means they're going to be like very potentially very anxious about certain things. And, that I felt like that would be a pretty influential factor in how funny they would find certain styles, considering how different these styles are, right? Yeah. So I ended up making this survey, which I think you ended up taking it, didn't you? You didn't end up taking it.
I did not.
I didn't end up taking my survey.
But I'm making up for it by now, giving you a place to talk about.
It's okay. I got almost 400 participants, so
that's good. I don't know if Eric did.
Well, it didn't matter anyway. Honestly, I was really worried at first because I thought that I was going to get like less than 100, and I was like, oh man.
No, but you got 400. That's a decent sample size.
I did get 400, and I know why I got 400 too. It's because when the person who emails out the psych surveys, when I was talking with her, she said that I was allowed to say what the subject line of the email was and then the email body. And so I literally just put, do you like memes? And I
knew that'd get attention.
That would definitely get attention within like college.
Speaking of, so like the jokes in the survey.
Okay, so the way that I structured this out, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail with this, but I had 5 pictures or memes, if you want to put it this way, that were representing each of these styles. And I picked these memes very, very carefully based on, criteria that I had set that was, that I got from the descriptions of these styles, right? So, and I was very careful. I didn't want these pictures, the humor within these pictures, to overlap styles. So when I chose the pictures, I wanted them to be specific. This is pure aggressive humor. Yeah. This is pure affiliative humor. This is pure self-enhancing or pure self-deprecating. Yeah. I didn't want there's a lot of jokes, and actually the more funny jokes combine these
aspects.
These aspects here. But so that's actually why I think some people found, it was actually very interesting because some people found these pictures really funny, others not so much. So I had it rated on a scale of 1 to 9, which
sounds weird.
Yeah, it's okay. I'll briefly explain why that was.
I think I know, but you describe.
Yeah. So initially, the way I was designing this study was I was going to have it rating. I was going to have this like offensive aspect to it, it's either really funny or really offensive, because I was going to look at that, but I decided not to. And originally, when that scale was going to happen, I was going to have 5 as neutral, and then everything above 5 to 9 was going to be like, oh, this is funny, and everything below 5 was going to be like, oh, this is offensive. I ended up not going that route, but I forgot to change the 9-point scale. So now I'm working on base 9, and it's really funny.
Wouldn't that avoid having
really annoying?
Wouldn't that avoid having a center number though?
Yeah.
So that's good. So no one's putting like, I didn't think it was not funny or funny.
I would rather have that and then have the base 10 thing to work with, because now I have all these, like, for instance, if someone rates it, if I have a mean of 4.5, that's actually me. Like, or if I have a mean of 5, right? That's actually above average.
Oh, I see.
Which
makes it difficult.
Makes it really weird to look at, and just
which has made which I know there's a huge issue with the data and figuring that out.
No, it's fine in theory. It's not actually that big of a deal.
Yeah.
It's just I feel that when people look at my results, they're automatically gonna think, oh, base 10, which is perfectly natural. But the ratings they're gonna see are actually higher in value.
Yeah, maybe you could put it in like out of like maybe a ratio, or I don't know how you could show the data to show more accurately.
It's just gonna have to be that way. But yeah. Anyway, where was I before that? So each of I had 5 of these pictures representing each of these 4 styles. So I had 20 pictures overall.
What was the repeat one? Or no, you had 5 pictures for each. Sorry, I thought you just had 5 pictures flat out.
And so what I ended up doing is, before they ended up even rating the memes, I had them take a quick personality survey, which was very short because I was only measuring their
consciences.
I was only measuring neuroticism. In this case. Yeah. So I threw in a few like decoy questions there, so like people wouldn't just like automatically catch on that I was strictly studying for neuroticism. But I mean, if you did, that's fine.
Yeah.
So got my data. I got a lot of data and ran it through some tests And what I ended up doing was just averaging all the scores for each participant. They had an average score for each style, and then an average overall humor score. And then they had I had their neuroticism scale, and I ended up splitting up everyone into 2 specific groups with neuroticism. So like took the med point of neuroticism, right?
Yeah.
And then everyone below this med point was I said was low in neuroticism. Everyone above it was high, and then I compared
above average.
Yeah, and then average, I compared those 2 groups. And currently almost finished with my results now, which is great. But yeah, it's very interesting because I can actually tell you what I found if you want. If
am very interested to know what you found, actually.
So, kind of contrary to my hypothesis, I actually found that people higher in neuroticism were rating all of these styles higher than people lower, except for affiliative. So affiliative was higher in people that were lower in neuroticism. But self-deprecating was very much higher, which was part of my hypothesis. I thought that was going to be the case. But
people higher in anxiety,
people that were higher in neuroticism, were rating self-deprecating as much funnier. But surprisingly, they did the same by a smaller margin with aggressive humor. I was not expecting that.
Yeah, that is
so. People higher in neuroticism thought that things that are aggressive are funnier, and with self-enhancing. Now, I did run into a problem because self-enhancing and affiliative ended up being very, very similar. In terms of like when I correlated them all together, there wasn't actually that much of a difference in what people were preferencing.
Yeah,
So I guess I picked my representative pictures wrong with that one.
Well, it could also just be like they're both the positive, the benign spectrum of it. So maybe just
that's true.
It could be the difference because like I don't know. You're a psych major, so you know better than me. But my general thought process is that in general, people are going to laugh at self-deprecation humor more than aggressive, maybe.
Yeah.
So thus you have that difference. Well, that's
actually. This is kind of a funny aspect of this. I'm considering putting this in my report, but it doesn't really need to be in there, but it's just something I noticed when I was looking at it. So my study wasn't actually looking at age, but I do know there's numerous studies that show that neuroticism tends to decrease with age, right?
Huh.
And so I found that people that were older were more appreciative of affiliative, which just makes a lot of sense when you think of it, considering that a lot of affiliative jokes are dad jokes, so you end up with people that are older that like affiliative, and they're going to be lower in neuroticism, which means so that's why I think I got
that's why dad jokes are dad jokes.
I guess so. Like so since people that are lower in neuroticism prefer affiliative jokes, then it makes sense that as you get older and decrease in neuroticism, you're going to prefer affiliative humor.
That's actually really funny.
I don't know why that's the case though, because I like affiliative humor a lot.
Ooh, I can't imagine you when you're older then. So I'm just going to type, if you want to know what dad jokes are, why dad jokes are called dad jokes. Jokes are dad jokes. Listen. Jokes are dad jokes. Listen. Boom. Okay. Yeah. There's just something I typed. That's actually really lovely. So, like, it sounds like you got data that gave interesting information.
Oh, yeah.
So, with that research you did, which is really interesting, I hope people do listen because I think it's very interesting. So that's for your final, right? Are you wanting to pursue, or your senior?
That is my senior project.
Yeah. Are you wanting to take those things and bring it with you outside of college? Like, what are you thinking the direction you want to go is at?
I don't know. My advisor told me that it's pretty rare that a senior project ends up finding conclusive results, whether or not it's like accordance with their hypothesis. Usually senior research psych projects end up inconclusive. Like they didn't get enough. Like
you found actual data.
Yeah. So I'm pretty happy with the way this worked out, but I don't know where I would go with it. I considered if I was going to do next term an independent study, if I was going to do that, I might even expand upon it, but it doesn't look like I'm going to do that.
Well, I mean, I don't know. Like, I think you'd get more than 400 people if you gave a longer period of time.
There's a lot I want to do that if I were continuing to study this, that I would want to do with it. Like, I already know that I want to like test the difference in age.
Yeah.
And I want to test more with cultural stuff too, because humor is one of these things that's universal in that it, even though all these cultures have different types of humor that sometimes are really hard for cross-culturally to get.
Mm-hmm.
So for instance, us understanding German humor might be really, really difficult.
Yeah.
The one thing that's in common is all cultures have a form of humor. They have a form of humor that adheres to these pretty similar aspects, actually, with these humor styles and with like the overall structure of humor. So I didn't actually go into that. I don't know if you want to hear about it or not, but I don't know.
I mean,
I don't know how much time we have left.
We have a little under 15 minutes, and usually these interviews are about the person. We did go a lot into, which I really loved hearing about. I had never heard the different types of humor said like that on that graph. I really like it, especially as many of you know, improv person.
Oh yeah,
I could see that in like a lot of aspects in improv. I'd say improv leans a lot on the at least our improv club leans a lot on like benign and external.
Mm-hmm.
The affiliative humor.
Yeah.
I knew where it was on the graph, but not on the affiliated. Like
I noticed that too. Like I noticed in a lot of the shows that you guys do, you don't do a lot of aggressive humor. Like sometimes,
and that's because,
but it's not.
We don't like to be aggressive. I think because like in improv, we're really big on don't punch down,
Mm-hmm.
and so like there are ways you can punch up, right, in aggressive humor, but like. I don't know if people in improv are quite skilled enough to do that effectively.
Right. There's
like
I've noticed some self-deprecating. You guys do.
Yeah, self-deprecation.
Like you eating the lemons.
Yes, me eating the lemons in 24 hour. That was really funny though.
And everyone's laughing at you because you're.
And then just a tiny bit of the what's it called again? Self-enhancing a little bit.
Like where you're making fun of the
situation
you're in.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
But you're right. We don't have a lot of aggressive, and I personally would be interested, and maybe I don't know how you could do it, but like keeping track of the kind of humor done in like every scene and seeing like where that goes.
Can you take a guess at which universally though within all ages and was the highest scored among all those styles?
I honestly
which do you think was the highest rated averaged?
I want to say self-deprecating. That's my guess, but
I would have thought the same, but it was actually aggressive. People like universally almost, despite your level of neuroticism or whatever, despite your age or gender, people preferred aggressive humor was actually by a substantial amount too. Like we're talking like almost 1 or 2 points average above the other ones.
Why sort of philosophically and sociologically do you think that is?
Because that's a can. See, this is what I was talking about with the can of worms here. I don't know. I think that is aggressive humor. This is why I said it's not always bad, is an essential part of humor. This is what people do socially instead of like fighting, especially in nowadays when people on talk shows or in politics can't actually, fight each other with swords and go duel. You have to have some other arsenal to take down your opponent, and you could do it through logic, and some people do combine both. But if you make the other person laugh at them, what they're essentially doing is agreeing with you, like, yes, you are superior. You know? And that's a very effective way to change people's minds, especially when you're trying to get people to vote for you. Which, I mean, if you watch the presidential debates of 2016, what Trump was doing to his opponents, especially the Republican opponents, like every single time he had some sort of like
one-liner
aggressive humor attacking their character, which worked, obviously.
Obviously did. That's interesting. Like, and you're right, it's not always a negative thing. It can be positive too. But that is interesting for improv, and honestly, that might be something to bring up because, like, probably not like at the club, but like two people in the club, I might be like, did you know, like, according to my RA Kai's research, aggressive humor is universally more well-liked. And that is really interesting. But also, like, it's hard. I think it's hard to do really right.
Yeah. So what you would have to do is, and I'm just spitballing here, but you'd have to coordinate it a little bit. So you set up a character that people don't like, that's being, like a dick.
That's the thing, right?
And then you make fun of them.
Because I was thinking, like, say in improv, we have someone play a misogynist, like, old person who's like, I'm horrible because I'm, you know.
So but you do that.
People wouldn't, improv doesn't do that, because what if in the scene people yes and that and they're like agreeing with you, and it's like, no. In that case, I think you want improvisers who are comfortable saying no, like,
well, yeah, or you'd have to, or you'd at least have to, like, I know it's because it's improv, you can't really talk about it beforehand, but you can at least talk about these concepts coming up beforehand. If you wanted to go that route, you'd be like, oh yeah, at some point, let's set up this guy, whatever, or
he's a real piece of crap.
It doesn't. You don't know the exact context in which this person's going to come up or what he's specifically going to do. But you say, okay, there's going to be a guy that people don't like, right? Mm-hmm. And I think to most of you, it'll be obvious when one of you is taking on that role, right? Yeah. And then you can make fun of that guy, and that whoever's taking on that role obviously has to like accept that people are going to make fun of them. Yeah. But you actually might get more laughs that way if you want.
I mean, according to your research with 400 people as a framework, that it would be true.
That's true.
That's really interesting. Well, we have a couple more minutes. So, in talking about you, you hail from Wisconsin.
I do.
You do indeed.
The land of cheese and beer.
The land of cheese and beer. Another thing, and I think this will be kind of how we close, is your time at Knox hasn't just been your education, obviously. You've also interacted a lot with, I think primarily your major extracurricular has been your, I'm trying to think, what would you consider your major thing you do outside of school is?
I mean, I do 3 things, I would say. Like, I've been on Student Senate a year prior, and then this year. And I've also, I mean, as you know, I've been an RA actually for the last 3 years, so that could be a major one.
Yeah. And then is your frat at all a big part of that, or?
It was last year, not so much
this year. Yeah.
Honestly.
But I mean, so is life. I mean, you fluctuate from things. Plus, you've been really busy, so something has to kind of.
Yeah, I mean, busyness is relative, obviously.
Yeah.
It's. I know that last year I bit off a lot more than I could chew, so I was like a lot more busy last year than I was this year.
But you now realize that you shouldn't be that busy.
Yes, because then you don't do as good of a job on anything.
There you go. That's the thing, spreading yourself too thin.
Yeah.
So with those things you do, you also do the fire spinning thing, which is really cool.
I
you make drones?
Never on campus.
We're just gonna let that be a joke. Where does that land on the joke line? Is that self-enhancing? I would say. Yeah, there you go. That was a self-enhancing joke. Because if you don't know, you're not allowed to have open flames on campus.
I don't know. It could be.
Self-deprecating, maybe.
No. I would say it could be a small amount of shade thrown at the school, but
yeah.
So that would be a lot of jokes encompass several of these categories, but like. Yeah.
Some embody other aspects more than others. Yeah.
But yeah. So yes, I occasionally fire dance.
Fire dance. You do. I feel like you more than a bunch of big extracurriculars do a lot of small things. Like you do drones, which is really cool.
Last year was a big proponent in that. I got really into building and testing out my racing drones on the track, which is part of the reason probably why they banned it. Yeah, the school likes to ban my hobbies.
That's true. So you got into fire dancing. They banned open flames on campus.
Yeah, I mean, it was banned before then, but they particularly focused on it afterward because usually people they didn't have a problem with any students, having open flames on campus before. So they got a lot more strict with that.
Yeah. So just all your hobbies get banned.
Yeah. See, and I guess one of the running jokes is I remember this year I started longboarding because I wanted to get places faster. And some of my friends that also longboard, since they know that whenever I start to get into something, they're like, No, Kai, don't start longboarding. Like,
I have noticed.
If school bans longboards, we're gonna blame you.
I have noticed an exponential increase of longboards.
Really?
I think I have. Like, more and more people get longboards,
Would it have something to do with, it going from winter to spring?
It could, but I don't know, because Grace bought a longboard but never used it. Lola, I think, has a longboard now, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Like
Tegan does.
Yeah, Tegan does. Like, so many people have longboards, and it's
useful.
Well, I could see it getting banned, is what I'm saying, because so many people end up using it. They'll walk into class and there'll just be like 10 longboards lined up on the wall, and a teacher will be like, "Why are there so many?" And it may, I don't know. I've always had the opinion, like, unless you're going into town a lot, I don't know. Like, I guess it's nice that you can leave 3 minutes later than you normally would, but also, like, campus is really small.
I feel that. I just really, like, if I'm hungry and I want to go to the caf, like, I don't want to get there in 5 minutes. Like, I want to get there in 2 minutes, obviously.
That's fair.
2 minutes is a long time.
Yeah, that's fair.
3 minutes is a long time to save. But.
Indeed. Well, we are getting closer to that time. I'm trying to think of more stuff I can just talk about you. I have one. Okay. Why did you become an RA? Because you're my RA. And by the way, a great RA. One of the best RAs, I think, if not the best.
But have you had any other RAs?
I have not, but I've met other RAs. And while I think they're wonderful, I think you're the best.
Oh, well, thank you. That means a lot. Well, I don't know. Why. So wait, what's your question exactly?
Why did you become an RA?
For the free room? No.
Because, I mean, surely that's an aspect of it. You wanted the free room and everything, but
I mean, there's a lot of reasons, to be honest. I'd been a camp counselor beforehand, and I figured, it's probably the same, right? Instead of like keeping small children from sneaking in candy to the camps, I just have to, prevent 18-year-olds from sneaking in other things, right?
Yeah.
It can't be that different.
Can't be that different, yeah.
Yeah. No, but I would say the real reason is I think I had a really great RA, but she helped me in a lot of other ways that I'm about to talk about. I think I made a lot of mistakes my freshman year, just like with academic planning. I didn't know where a lot of things were in a way. I didn't know like what to get involved with and what to stay away from or whatnot. And so I felt like a lot of these mistakes that I made freshman year made it harder in the long run down the line, And so yeah. I've always had these things where I'll be like, or these moments where I'll be like, oh man, if only I didn't do this freshman year, like this would be so much easier right now. I could like do all these things. And yeah. I've always like, I wish I could just go back to freshman year and do everything right. And then everything would be fine. And so I feel like I've gotten better at this. Obviously I'm never going to hit everything, but especially during the first term of freshman year, I've been trying to, with my residents, like, tell them where all these things are, what they should do to, like, learn the ropes on campus as fast as possible so they don't make these mistakes. And I think it's worked out pretty well so far. Honestly, I feel like I've gotten better throughout the years doing that. And, pay it forward, right?
Exactly. So that's really good. So we're almost out of time. So I'm going to ask you one more question. It's a question I ask everyone who's on my show. All right. It's the last question I always ask. This is recorded, obviously, on Facebook. Mm-hmm. And after it's done, you'll, of course, share it so that your family and friends can watch it. But the thing I always ask is, if you could tell future you or anyone watching anything, if you could, like, send a message through this video to whoever the 100-ish people that normally, I think, watch it, what would you say? Or whoever skipped to the end to listen to the last couple minutes.
Future Kai, procrastinate tomorrow, not today, okay? You can always have time for that later.
There you go. You can procrastinate tomorrow.
Exactly.
You can procrastinate procrastinating.
Yeah, I'm going to put it off. Because I can do it later.
That's wonderful. Well, that's the show. This was really fun. I mean, it wasn't quite as like boom, 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 but I think there was a lot in this show of like interesting things that I'm definitely going to go back and listen to.
Yeah.
To get your research again and again and be like, that's
Or
interesting.
you could just, ask them to. Like,
that's true too. But when do we have the time to do that? I don't know.
Anytime.
Well, we'll probably play Magic when we do have time.
Yes.
So maybe we can talk about it while we play Magic if we don't get distracted.
Yeah.
Sounds good to me.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's the show. This has been 90.7 WVKC, the voice of Knox, the big picture. And we will see you guys next week with hopefully another guest. I mean, sometimes guests are last second, sometimes they aren't. It depends. So there you go. We will see you guys next time.